Welcome, fellow plebs. My name is Sean, and this is
Tribunus Plebis.
And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about Project 2025 and how it affects labor, unions, worker rights, and the labor movement more broadly. Project 2025 is the name of the presidential transition project, which was published as a nearly 1,000-page book by the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation itself is like an ultra-conservative, neoliberal, Christian nationalist, supposed quote-unquote think tank. The book is titled The Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. This document, this paper, I guess book is, it's 1,000 pages. Let's just call it a book. It lays out a plan for the first 180 days of the Donald Trump presidency, should he win. And I guess I'll say technically in the book, it says that it is for the next conservative president. But in this case, we're talking about Donald Trump, so that's who I'm going to talk about. It is a radical, far-right, extremist, Christian nationalist, and even fascistic plan. It's basically laying out a game plan for when, how, and why the Trump administration can change the country and the government for, in at least their eyes, the better. Now, 2025 does a lot of really bad things. It does bad things for democracy. It imbues a president with immense powers. It destroys government agencies. It weakens whatever democracy is left. Along with dozens, or I guess I should say hundreds of other really bad ideas. We aren't going to get into all of them. We aren't going to get into a lot of them on this episode. There are shows, articles, and podcasts out there going over all the different aspects of 2025 and what it means for us as a country. Today, I'm just going to focus on and examine several of the issues which are important to workers, unions, and the labor movement. And I think it's important to break it down, at least in the beginning, by items, because we really do need to understand what's in here. We can't just be ranting sort of generally about how bad it is, because it represents a very real danger. And just sort of generally ranting doesn't quite express how bad this thing is, at least to me. So let's hit the union part first, and then we'll talk about worker rights a little bit more broadly, and other worker issues, and also after that, bigotry. Because that is it really, like I say stunningly, but it's not really, I guess, surprising. But they just literally wrote into this thing that we're going back to Jim Crow. We're going back to straight up bigotry. Especially bigotry backed by religion. So the proposed reforms to organize labor, the labor movement, workers, they include these things, but they certainly aren't limited to it. There's a lot of minor things in here as well. I'm just focusing on the highlights. They want to eliminate card checks and card signings. They want to make it easier to decertify a union. They want to allow states to literally end public sector unions, including teachers' unions. And they want to, in the end of it, eliminate unions altogether in favor of what they call employee involvement organizations, which would be in practice a company-run union, which would in practice be pointless. Okay, so banning card checks. This plan wants to eliminate card checks and card signings. In this instance, they're talking about collecting signatures from fellow employees to then request a vote through the NLRB, or get the company to voluntarily recognize a union, which they never do. So to get a vote, and you get 50% of employees plus one, that's what you need, is one worker over 50% to get a vote. Now, a true card check is where you get 50% plus one to sign a card, and it forces the company to automatically recognize the union. This is not the law right now. There's actually a card check law in Congress that's been sitting there since Biden got in office, that hasn't gone anywhere. But the key takeaway here is just people signing a card to signal even like a soft interest in a union is like taken away from you. It's denied you. They don't even want you to have that. They don't want you to be able to express that you maybe want this. They're even taking a maybe away from you. Now, Project 2025, like I say, it wants to do away with card signings and card checks altogether. They claim it's to increase democracy, but really it's to swing power in favor of the bosses, in favor of the company. It's to, I mean, it's not even to swing it, right? Because the workers don't even have power now. It's to deny any more power to the workers and give more power to the ownership class. So it's like a double shift, right? It's a double widening of the gulf. They, like I said, they claim it's to increase democracy, but it isn't. The reason why they don't want a true card check is because they'd rather a vote, like a secret ballot vote, instead of a card check. Because like a voting option, it triggers a significant delay of time from the time that you trigger the vote to you actually get the vote. And that is time which the companies take advantage of with all of their money and all of the control they have over workers. So they will spend hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of dollars in the case of like Amazon or Starbucks to force you on the clock to sit in 20, 30, 60-minute long meetings where they just club you repeatedly over the head with anti-union rhetoric and anti-union propaganda. So they force you to listen to the anti-union messaging. They scare you. And in the time between the signaling you want to vote to getting a vote, they can punish the workers who started this. They can punish the organizers. They will reduce their hours, put them in worse shifts, put them in worse jobs. They'll fire them, right? They'll discipline them. They'll write them up for every minor infraction that you have. We had a recent episode talking about INSA, which is a weed shop out here. And they, as soon as they wanted a union, they went back in time. They found every time everybody was late, they went back, they watched a video to write people up for things they had done months ago. They do not want you to form a union. They will do everything they can to oppress it. Now, make no mistake, all of this, despite what they're writing about democracy and wanting more choice, these things are meant to harm the ability of workers to exert their own will over their own lives. It's to take your free will away. It's to force you to listen to them and to have no power to fight back. It is to deny us the freedom to live our lives as we see fit. This project also wants to eliminate what is called the contract bar rule, which establishes some limits as to when a union can be decertified and how to decertify a union. The key point here is that the bar rule prevents attempts to oust a union which has been voted in for its 3 years or the end of the first contract, whichever is shorter. That's generally the period that a union is protected from decertification. There are other technical details like that can be shorter for various reasons, but that's basically it. It's 3 years or the first contract, whichever is shorter. So it's generally at least 3 years. Now, 2025 aims to rid the world of this established rule in order to get more decertification votes against established unions or new unions. Effectively, they want to allow dissenters and politically motivated anti-union workers to be able to get decertification votes at any point where they feel like there has been a waning of support for the union. Now, this is something which is typically seen right after a yes vote. So you have the union, you're part of a union. They are now negotiating with the company, which delays and delays. All the while, they are hammering employees with meetings where they're forced to be there and listen to them, the company tell you, like, oh, your union is terrible. They're not doing anything for you. You know, you need to decertify this thing. And so there's usually, I guess what I'm getting at here is during negotiations, a lot of times there's a lull. And that lull, it gets, especially people who maybe were on the fence, who voted yes, but weren't, 100% behind it. Those people start to maybe get upset. That's a lever that the anti-union people can work on. And they get, or they have a chance to get a decertification vote weeks, months, maybe just before a contract is signed to decertify, right? Because there's this lull, there's a little bit of anger, a little bit of resentment. Essentially they want to decertify new unions as soon as they're formed. They don't even want unions to get off the ground. Now, even more grotesque than that is the attempt to protect employers, or to encourage employers, I guess is a better way to say it, who fire, punish, or otherwise abuse employees who are working towards unionizing a workplace. They literally want it to be okay to fire workers for organizing. They want to make it okay to fire workers who want to be represented by a union. And this is spitting directly in the face of not just many decades of precedent, but directly in the face of just the working class, the labor movement of this country, and it's just an absolutely disgusting betrayal. Now, Project 2025, like I said, it also endorses J.D. Vance's bill, the current vice president pick, which would create the company-run unions, which I mentioned a second ago. And there is absolutely nothing good about a company union. And this isn't even like the pejorative use of the word company union. Like we talked about the United Auto Workers for a long time. They were a company union. And we said that because they weren't combative with the companies. They were very friendly. They were overly friendly. They were working with them. So this isn't that. This is just literally the company sends in a few middle managers, to have monthly roundtable meetings with some bootlicking loser ass workers. And it does nothing to further the goals of the workers themselves. It's pointless. It does nothing. It's just, it only serves to, I guess, shine the corporate turd. Sorry about that. So that is most of the union related stuff. It's the highlights, it's the big points. Like I said, if you ever want to read this thing, there's more in there. So let's move on to, I guess, a sort of a slight tangent here and talk about individual worker rights here for a second. Kind of worker issues a little bit more broadly outside of just unions. Now, this isn't entirely removed from direct anti-union stuff, but they are definitely, they're shaking hands. 2025 wants to, at least in part, change overtime rules and remove legal protections for overtime. In connection to the removal of overtime, the project also calls for the removal of vacation time being provided by companies, but which workers can then work overtime to get back. And I'll explain this in a moment. It's a monstrosity of an idea. It also wants to ignore and or prevent any sort of federal minimum wage from existing. Now, the overtime and vacation stuff sort of work hand in hand here, especially they want to eliminate as much overtime as possible, as much time and a half pay as possible. They don't want to eliminate overtime. They don't care if you work 80 hours a week. They don't want to pay you time and a half after 40 hours. So they want to get rid of as much as possible and remove the benefit of vacation time as an incentive for workers. In place of vacation time and in place of normal overtime pay, they want us to have to work overtime, and instead of being paid, we would so-called earn vacation time. In the example they give in the paper, if you work 2 hours overtime per week over a year, you would not get paid for that overtime. You would get regular pay. So you wouldn't get extra money up front, but you'd earn a few weeks of overtime, or a few weeks of vacation time. This means that they want you to work overtime, essentially for free, to bank vacation time, which you may or may not ever see. This is some dystopian nonsense. Now, they do provide a couple of interesting exceptions and carve-outs to these proposed overtime rules. The first is that, well, first off, they want to declare Sunday a non-work day, right? They want to make it the Sabbath, the religious day. They want to make it non-work for as many people as possible. You know, not for rest, but specifically they want to have time off so people will worship. And this really reinforces one of the overarching purposes of this project, and that is making the United States a Christian nationalist fascist cesspool. But according to these complete and utter dorks, if you work the Sabbath, then and only then should you get time and a half overtime pay. So they want as few people as possible to work the Sabbath, but if you're forced to, then and only then can you get overtime pay if you work more than 8 hours. So it really does, in the end, boil down to Christian nationalism here. In addition to that, anyone legally required to work the Sabbath, think hospital workers and EMTs and police and the like, they do not get time and a half. So retail workers would, right? Which is kind of interesting. Healthcare workers don't get it, but fast food workers could if they work more than 8 hours. Now, why? Right? And I bet all the cops out there would get time and a half as well, because Christian fascists need the pigs to brutalize workers. The project also wants to get the children back into mining. They are literally taking the children yearn for the mines meme, and they literally wrote it in here that there are children who yearn to operate dangerous machines. It literally, well, it doesn't literally say yearns, but it says that there are children who want to work with dangerous equipment. And this is absolutely one of the more bizarre sections of this whole paper. They say that young people, those under 18, who are currently prevented, rightfully so, I might add, from doing some very dangerous jobs, things like working like dangerous machines, working in mines, working in confined spaces, working in oil fields, fishing boats, like some of the most dangerous jobs in the country, even the world. They think that these rules should be removed because, hey, fuck it, right? Let's have child labor again. They yearn for the mines. They yearn for the dangerous machines. And their justification is literally some kids want to work and some kids yearn to operate dangerous machines. And they follow it up, I guess, with a shrug and like who cares if children die in the mines? They work cheap. There's more of them out there, right? Absolute monsters. And a couple more things before I wrap this up. And the first is that they want to eliminate merit staffing in the government and replace as many governmental workers as they can with partisan appointed hacks. Literally, they want to end normal everyday hiring practices, right? Job interviews and job placement, and just have the president appoint people to the jobs. And these aren't, I guess people maybe hear that and they say, well, doesn't the president appoint jobs now, right? They appoint the head of the EPA, the NLRB, and everything. And yeah, they sort of do, right? The president typically appoints very high-level positions, the heads of governmental agencies, the heads of departments and the like. And this document is riddled with calls related to this to replace heads of departments like the FDA, the EPA, and more interesting to those listening here, the FLRA and the NLRB, the two primary labor departments of the country. Their replacements should, according to Project 2025, be people who are diametrically opposed to the existence of these departments and diametrically opposed to the work that these departments try to do. They will be instructed that if they can't, destroy these agencies outright, then they should at least make them so weak and unobstructive that they are unable to function in any reasonable way or to any degree that anybody would notice, right? Just to get rid of them or to have them around in name only, but functioning so poorly that they can't actually do their jobs. All responsibilities for any of these matters, from the cleanliness of rivers, the safety of workers, to the adjudication of workplace harassment claims and bigotry, they should, according to the Heritage Foundation, according to this project, they should all fall to the private sector, which we all know would be disastrous for every single one of those categories, never mind the thousands of other issues out there that, I didn't mention here. These are despicable attempts to place more power into the greedy little fists of the corporate oligarchy, and even more importantly for this episode here, to rip it from the grasping fingers of the working class and hand it to the ownership class. Now, like I said, there are things in here that will affect the working class that I haven't mentioned, and I encourage everybody to download a PDF of the book. You can find them for free. And once you're on that PDF, you can search for keywords like labor, NLRB, minimum wage, unions, union, and so on. Whatever else you want to do. You can look up DEI, critical race theory, women, family. It's a great way to really confirm what I've mentioned so far, or to find even more things, like the smaller things that I haven't brought up pertaining to workers in this paper. Now, these ghoulish monsters even want to eliminate basically all references to race, religion, and ethnicity from paperwork. They want anything even remotely resembling DEI programs or affirmative action to be literally illegal. They want to make it affirmatively legal to fire people for being in the LGBTQ plus community, and only for being in that community. The plan places a particular emphasis on making sure that trans people suffer the most along the way, going out of its way multiple times, many times, right from the beginning to the end, to highlight how they should specifically target transgender individuals with these policies. Yes, they want bosses to be able to fire us because of who we like to have sex with and share our lives with no repercussions. The project also calls for federal abortion bans and other restrictions on the healthcare and choices of our female friends. I know that the Handmaid's Tale comparisons are kind of tired right now, but I mean, it just fits, right? Now, I will say that in an attempt at undeserved fairness, that Donald Trump himself has denied being a part of this project or even being really aware of it. And we can believe him on both counts or not, but even if we believe him, it's still horrible. It's still bad because so many of his previous administration's hand-picked goons are actually part of this project and a part of the Heritage Foundation or just straight up controlled by them. And so whether Trump himself is fully behind this, whether he's really behind the wheel turning it, or if it's just that, you know, it's been relegated to the people he will appoint, because this isn't the kind of guy who's going to micromanage agency heads once they're in office, right? And he's going to be putting people in who really believe in this project. So like I said, whether Trump's doing it himself or not, the people make the policy. And the people that he will appoint will be at the behest of the Heritage Foundation and other think tanks that are just like them and other lobbyists who are just like them, ultra-conservative, Christian nationalist, loser goons. And the speed absolutely will speed along from the moment he's sworn in. Jennifer Abruzzo, in particular, is who has been the best NLRB we've had, or the best NLRB head that we've had in my life and in a very long time. She is particularly noted in here as somebody who needs to be fired on day one. Along with her, thousands of federal workers will be reclassified and fired by hand-picked political lackeys, most of whom will be hell-bent on destroying their new jobs from the inside. They will try to destroy these agencies. Power will be shifted to corporations. Federal workers will lose prevailing wage protections. African American history, gender studies, and women's history will literally be banned in higher education. The attacks on unions, on labor, on the working class will intensify, and the workers will be, at least in a legal and political sense, disarmed. Children will be sent back to the mines, which the Heritage Foundation believes that they yearn for. Now, I think a lot of people out here sort of shunt to the side this Project 2025 thing, and they view it as some sort of, you know, wild-eyed weirdos spinning conspiracy theories, or, you know, maybe just making something up whole cloth that doesn't really exist. But this is a real thing. You can download it. You can actually purchase a 980-ish page book from the Heritage Foundation. You can see who wrote it. You can see who wants to implement it. You can see exactly how they want to implement it and when and why and where. This is a very real thing, a very real plan, and it's a very real plan supported by very real, very powerful supporters. The blueprint that 2025 lays out for the escalation of the class war under a second Trump administration contains within it several hundred policy recommendations that are as harmful as they are extreme. The goal is to reduce whatever semblance of democracy remains in this country fundamentally and alter the entirety of the federal government. They'll do that by making it smaller, less able to function, and basically by crippling it from the inside. All so that Trump and his lackeys can turn governmental functions over to the private sector and turn this place into a fascist cesspool. They want to decimate retirement benefits wreck healthcare plans, literally destroy public education. I may have actually forgotten to mention that they want to destroy or destroy and make illegal teachers' unions. They want to oppress women's healthcare rights, reduce women to nothing but baby-producing housewives, demonize non-Americans, but most importantly, demonize non-Christians and non-whites, remove the Americans' essential rights, essential personal rights, and they want to shunt enormous wealth away from workers and into the pockets of the already wealthy and the powerful few. They even want to end the Head Start program, which serves nearly 1 million poverty-stricken children across the country. Now, how sick do you need to be to deny food, activities, and learning for the most disadvantaged people, the most vulnerable people, poor children who live amongst us? Conservatism is sickness in this sense. The entire project aims to, in their words, bring God back, bring religion back into public life. They want to destroy the labor movement, which has made tens of millions of American lives, of human lives, to be safer, richer, and happier than they were before unions existed or would have been without the labor movement. The goal of Project 2025 is to rip away the various rights and laws that unions have fought for with literal blood and literal lives, and to roll the calendar back to some sort of idealized past that I think we all know never really existed. And actually, you know what? That's not true. It's actually not true. The time they want to roll back did exist. It's called the Jim Crow era. It was an era that was defined by, like, its racial, gender, and religious framings. It was an era of separate but equal. Women who didn't work that often or worked very specific jobs. They'll talk about nursing and teaching jobs for women and almost nothing else. It was a time when the people who like this sort of program knew that non-white people, brown-skinned people, would stay in their place. And it was a time that things like marital rape did not exist. It was legal. When they say to make America great again, this is the era that they are looking for. This is precisely what they are looking for. Project 2025 literally opens with screeds against diversity and screechings about God. God is good and people of differing backgrounds are just bad. Or actually, they're not just bad. It's never that simple with these people. They are flat out evil. They are out to get you, according to these disgusting dorks. The entire document is pro-Christianity, pro-nationalism, pro-Christian nationalism, pro-fascism, and it is anti-minority, anti-immigrant, and anti-LGBTQ. It's literally bigotry and hatred in the form of a policy book. That's what it is. It is this conservative promise. It's a 900-page political necronomicon. We as workers need to reject this nonsense. We need to understand it and reject it. Immigrants, Jewish people, Muslims, black people, non-believers, women, they aren't the bad guys. They make life here better. And the fact of the matter is that while these sorts of talking points might be cheered for, at these weird-ass political rallies, And they might trend on Twitter, but I really don't believe that those of us who are actually, working class, actually out there, lacing up work boots every day, and we come home greasy and bruised and aching and just worn out, only to find out that the cost of everything that we need has gone up, but our pay hasn't. I have a hard time believing, or I'm hoping, maybe beyond hope, that we don't really sit at home fretting about DEI or critical race theory. I really hope that we just want to be able to afford a house or even rent and some food to keep us going, a little time with the family, and maybe have a little bit of money left over to have some fun. Now, there is certainly some subset of subhuman dorks out there who wax poetic about the United States returning itself to the storied past when, white Christian males reign supreme, not just over other races, but over their wives and children as well. Right? The implications for workers here are broad. Project 2025 would lead directly to a weakening of unions, shift the labor market ever more heavily in employers' favor, and result in lower wages, worse benefits, and longer, more dangerous days and jobs. And for workers who fall into minority categories, it does far more than make your job less safe, lower paying, or like having longer weeks. It means that bosses could fire you just for characteristics which are inherent to your very being. Things like loving someone of the same gender, being trans, or just not dressing quite how your boss believes that you should dress. So to wrap this up, I feel like I've been droning on here a little bit, but to wrap it up, Project 2025 is the bulwark, the spear point maybe, of an agenda and strategy that would absolutely alter, possibly outright destroy, the functioning of the federal government and its agencies in a way that is directly deleterious to the American worker, the working class, and the labor movement. They will make discrimination legal again, literally legal again. They will tear down public education, strip workers of their rights, and just shatter democratic, worker-created establishments. Now, I guess at some point here I wanted to say something a little bit positive. So I'm going to give you, 30 seconds here after all of this of a little bit of positivity, or at least things that we can work towards. How about that? We can work towards a federal minimum wage of $25 an hour. Yes, $25. Get paid. 15 is in the past. We got to fight for 25 now. We can fight for real card check. Like I said, there's an actual card check law, or a card check bill in Congress right now that is just sort of withering away. Push for it. We should fight for more paths for unionization. Less interference from employers in union elections is another important thing that we can aim for. We can aim for things like Medicare for all. Or it doesn't have to be Medicare for all. It could be some other, similar socialized federal healthcare program. Let's all be healthy. Let's all have actual, real access to real healthcare. Let's eliminate the roadblock in the horror show. The absolutely despicable horror show that is the insurance industry. Let's get rid of it. Let's just get healthcare. Rather than destroy public education, and I just know that this is going to sound utterly batshit to people out there maybe many of you, I'm sure a lot of you are going to agree with me, but let's actually fund public education. Let's do it. Let's make the public schools better. How? Well, we could start by taxing the ultra wealthy people who live here. I know. How mind-blowing is this, right? Put money in the schools. Holy cow. We can make Social Security better. We can have better welfare, better unemployment benefits, and the list goes on forever. And yes, there is a kernel of truth buried under all the bigotry, religiosity, and hatred of poor people that is Project 2025. And that truth is that some of these programs, they don't work extremely well. They propose to simply stop helping poor people to survive, to let children starve, to let children be hungry, to let teenagers die in mines, and to let employers work us to death at starvation wages rather than just do things a little bit better. Because it would make the rich people even more wealthy to do it that way. And, you know, like, I guess maybe that's not even true. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it. Under our current capitalist system, these rich people would still get richer, right? If we funded public schools and fed children, they would still get more rich, right? The billionaires of the world would not stop accumulating money because we fed children. They just wouldn't get rich as quickly if we did. And that's the part that they can't tolerate. That they might die with $345 billion, but if these poor children had just done the proper thing and just died when they were 5, then they'd have died with $345.01 billion. And that irks these monsters to the very end that 0.01 wasn't there. The only way to come close to evening the power dynamics between labor and the capitalist ownership class, short of an actual revolution, is through solidarity and through unions. As workers, we've long fought for bread, but we've also fought for roses too. Project 2025 wants to take away the roses, it wants to take away the bread, and it wants to leave you only with old, stale gruel. Don't let them do it. And I think that's it. Thank you. Hit me up in the comments if you like this. We are part of Tribunus Plebis Media, is part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. There's a link in the description. There are over 100 labor and working class related shows in the network. Please click through, browse through some of the other shows. There are some very good ones. And we also, if you're still here, we have swag. We have some t-shirts and shirts. There's a link in the description. It's a good way to support the channel. It's a good way to support the podcast and also get something of your own. The shirts are super comfortable. I like them. I wear them all the time. And that's it. Thank you very much. Love you all. Bye.